Balqis was no ordinary child, though she never thought of herself as special. She was born in a humble village where most families lived in small mud houses with thatched roofs and simple lives. Her father was a poor man who worked hard in the fields, but sorrow came too early. Balqis's mother died when she was still a little child. She was too young to even remember her mother's face, too young to keep her smile in her memory. All she had were stories whispered by neighbors about how kind and gentle her mother had been. Her father, lonely and broken, thought it was best to remarry. He told himself he was doing it for Balqis, so she would have a woman to care for her. But what he brought into the house was no mother's love. The new wife had a heart as cold as stone, and her eyes were filled with pride and envy. She came into the house not to nurture, but to rule. From the very first day, Balqis became a stranger in her own home. The stepmother's tongue was sharp, and her heart was bitter. To her, Balqis was not a daughter, but a servant. She would order her to fetch water before the sun rose, to scrub the floors until her small hands were raw, and to cook meals she was rarely allowed to eat from. Balqis's father tried at first to protect her, but he was weak before his new wife's cruelty. Slowly, he became silent, turning his eyes away whenever the girl was mistreated. Soon, Balqis realized she was alone. But even in such hardship, the girl's heart did not grow hard. She carried inside her a strange gentleness, as though sorrow had only carved more space in her soul for kindness. The villagers began to notice this about her. She was known as the girl who never turned away from suffering. If she saw a hungry child, she shared her bread. If she met an old man carrying heavy firewood, she would run to help, though her arms ached from her own chores. Even a bird with a broken wing or a stray dog wandering near the market would find comfort in her hands. Balqis is not like other children, the villagers whispered. She carries her mother's blessing. And indeed, it seemed so. Animals trusted her in strange ways. Birds flew down to rest on her shoulders, their wings fluttering near her face without fear. Dogs followed her in quiet loyalty, wagging their tails at her steps. Even deer in the forest, who usually ran at the sight of humans, would pause when she appeared, looking at her with calm dark eyes. Balqis herself never thought of this as special. To her, kindness was simple. She loved giving more than receiving. She often walked into the forest after finishing her chores, carrying herbs in her hands, humming softly to the trees and streams as if they were old friends. Some villagers even said that the forest listened to her voice, for the wind would sometimes rise gently when she spoke, as though nature itself was answering her. But not everyone admired her. Her stepmother and stepsisters hated her more with each passing day. They could not understand how, despite their cruelty, the villagers still loved her. While they painted their faces with powder and adorned themselves with trinkets of brass and beads, Balqis wore plain clothes, yet she still shone brighter. Her beauty was not of ornaments but of purity, like the sun that breaks through clouds, warm, steady, and true. Their jealousy grew like fire. Every kind word spoken about Balqis was a thorn in their hearts. Why does everyone love her? They would whisper to each other. She has nothing, and yet they praise her as if she were a queen. Soon, gossip began to spread. Some villagers, poisoned by envy, whispered that perhaps Balqis was not an ordinary girl. She speaks to birds, one muttered. She walks with animals. Maybe she is a witch. Others shook their heads, but the seeds of suspicion were planted. Her stepmother clung to these whispers greedily. In her mind, Balqis's kindness was no gift but a weapon, one that made her own daughters look small. And in her heart, the seed of envy was growing into something darker, something dangerous. Balqis did not know it yet, but the same love that made her precious to the villagers was the very thing that would soon lead her into a fate darker than she could imagine. Envy is like a seed. When planted in a dark heart, it grows quickly, spreading its roots until it chokes out everything good. In Balqis's home, this seed had been planted long ago, and now it grew stronger each day. Her stepmother could not bear the way villagers admired Balqis. Look at her, they would whisper, so humble, so kind, so blessed. Those words felt like arrows in the stepmother's chest. To her, every smile Balqis received was stolen from her own daughters. Every kind word was a robbery. The two stepsisters were no different. They spent hours decorating themselves with beads and bangles, yet no one praised them the way people praised Balqis when she wore only her plain cotton dress. Their laughter was forced, their beauty shallow, while Balqis's presence was natural, like fresh water flowing from a spring. "Why do they look at her as if she is a queen?" one sister hissed. "She has no gold, no fine clothes, no family name." The other sneered, "It is because she pretends to be humble. She tricks them with her sweet face." The more they spoke, the more bitter they became. The stepmother's hatred burned hottest of all. She wanted Balqis gone, not just shamed, not just cast aside, but erased. One evening, when the sky was red with the last light of the sun, the stepmother gathered her daughters in a small back room. The oil lamp flickered, throwing shadows across their faces. Her voice was low but sharp, like a blade. "This girl must be removed," she said. "So long as she lives among us, she steals what should belong to you: respect, admiration, even pity. The villagers will never see your worth while her shadow covers you." Her daughters leaned forward eagerly. "Then let us send her into the forest and leave her there," one suggested. "The animals will finish her." But the stepmother shook her head. "No. Somehow, she always survives. If she returned, they would call her blessed. They would praise her even more." The second daughter whispered, "Then let us shame her. We can spread lies. We will tell the villagers she is a witch, that she charms the animals with spells." Again, the stepmother frowned. "Her innocence is her shield. Even if we lie, they will believe her tears above our words." No, humiliation is not enough. The room fell silent. The only sound was the crackle of the oil lamp. Then the youngest daughter, her eyes glittering with malice, leaned closer. Her voice was almost a whisper. "What of the pit?" The air grew cold at those words. All of them knew the place. It was an old, forgotten hole at the edge of the forest, deep and dark, feared by the villagers. Long ago, it was said to be a hiding place for outcasts, but over the years, it had become something worse. Now it was known as the Pit of Serpents. Snakes filled its depths, vipers, cobras, and serpents of all kinds. Stories were told of animals and even travelers who wandered too close and never returned. From the pit came hissing sounds at night, like whispers of death. No one dared to go near it. The stepmother's lips curled into a cruel smile. "Yes," she said softly. "The pit. No one survives it. To be thrown in is to be forgotten. The villagers will believe she was destroyed by nature itself. Who would dare question it? It will look as if fate itself condemned her." Her daughters shivered. Fear and excitement tangled together in their hearts. The very thought of the pit made their blood run cold, yet the idea of seeing Balqis gone forever thrilled them. They began to whisper plans eagerly. They would wait until the village was asleep. They would bind Balqis and lead her to the pit. They would say nothing of it, for once she was gone, there would be no proof. If anyone asked, they would spread whispers that Balqis was cursed, that the snakes had always followed her, and finally, they had claimed her. The stepmother's heart swelled with triumph. For the first time in years, she felt power return to her. The thought of Balqis's soft eyes wide with fear, her gentle voice silenced forever, brought a cruel satisfaction. Outside, the night was falling, heavy and silent. The moon climbed slowly into the sky, but it seemed to shine less brightly, as if the heavens themselves refused to watch what was being planned. In that small room, envy had fully bloomed into cruelty. The plan was set. The pit would soon claim Balqis. Or so they believed. The night chosen for Balqis's fate was moonless. Darkness lay heavy on the village, wrapping every hut in silence. It was the kind of night when dogs refused to bark, and even the wind held its breath. Only the owls in the forest called out, their cries sounding like warnings of something dreadful to come. Inside her stepmother's house, Balqis slept lightly on her thin mat. Her body was tired from a day of endless chores, but her heart was peaceful. She had spent the evening helping an old woman carry firewood, and though her arms still ached, she smiled as she drifted into sleep. She did not know that while she rested, her enemies were waiting. Close to midnight, the stepmother crept into her room with her daughters. They moved like shadows, carrying ropes and cloth. Without a word, they fell upon Balqis. A rough hand clamped over her mouth, and before she could cry out, a strip of coarse cloth was tied across her lips. Her wrists were bound tightly, the rope biting into her skin. Her eyes flew open, wide with shock. She twisted against the ropes, but she was too weak against 3 pairs of hands. The stepsisters grinned in the darkness, their eyes glittering with cruel delight. The stepmother bent low and whispered harshly, "Come quietly, or it will be worse for you." Balqis's heart pounded, but she did not scream. She did not curse them. She only looked at them with wide, unblinking eyes. There was no hatred in them, only sorrow, as though she pitied them more than she feared them. That silence unsettled her captors. They had expected tears, begging, and cries for mercy. Instead, her calmness was like a stone in their chest, heavy and strange. Yet they pushed on, dragging her out into the night. Their footsteps crunched on gravel, echoing in the silence. The village slept, but not completely. Some neighbors stirred at the sounds. Curtains shifted, doors opened just a crack. Shadowed faces peered out, curious and uneasy. "Who goes there?" one villager whispered, pulling his shawl tighter. Another, sharper-eyed, muttered, "It is the widow and her daughters, and Balqis with them. But why is she bound?" Curiosity spread like fire. Quietly, men and women slipped from their houses, following at a distance. Their whispers carried in the air, soft as the rustle of leaves. Where are they taking her? Why at this hour? Is it true? Are they leading her to the pit? Fear gripped their hearts, for the pit was a place no one dared to mention loudly, even in daylight. The journey was cruel. Balqis stumbled often, her bare feet cut by stones, but she never cried out. Each time she fell, she rose again with quiet resolve. The younger stepsister hissed in frustration, "Why does she not beg? Why does she not fight?" But Balqis only gazed ahead, her lips pressed together beneath the gag, her eyes strangely calm, as if she knew something they did not. At last, after a long walk through tangled weeds and whispering trees, they reached the edge of the pit. It loomed before them like a wound in the earth, deep and foul. The smell of damp soil and rot filled the air. From below came faint sounds, the dry rustle of scales, the hiss of serpents hidden in the dark. The villagers who had followed from afar stopped at the edge of the trees, shivering. They dared not come closer. Some made signs of protection with their hands, murmuring prayers under their breath. The stepmother's breath came fast, but her will did not falter. She motioned to her daughters. Together they dragged Balqis to the pit's edge. Her wrists bled from the rope. Her hair was tangled, her face streaked with dust, yet her dignity remained untouched. The youngest stepsister leaned close, her smile twisted with malice. "Let us see if your friends in the forest will save you now," she sneered. Then, with one brutal shove, Balqis was hurled into the darkness. Gasps broke from the hidden villagers. They clutched one another, bracing for what they were certain must follow, the cries of terror, the screams of flesh pierced by fangs. But the night held its breath. No scream came. No cry echoed. Only silence. The pit hissed and whispered, but no agony followed. Balqis had vanished into the earth, and with her, the certainty of what should have been. The conspirators froze. Their cruel triumph cracked like fragile glass. The villagers exchanged fearful glances, for what they had expected did not come. The pit had swallowed Balqis. But something unseen had also begun to stir. When Balqis hit the bottom of the pit, she expected sharp pain and death. She expected fangs tearing into her flesh, venom burning through her blood. But none of that came. Instead, the ground beneath her felt soft, as though unseen hands had laid leaves and grass to catch her fall. Her eyes opened slowly, adjusting to the darkness. Around her, the pit was alive with sound, the dry sliding of scales, the soft hissing of snakes that watched from every corner. Their eyes glowed faintly, like sparks in the night. Her heart pounded, but strangely, she was not afraid. Instead, a strange calm filled her chest, the same calm that had carried her through the cruel walk to the pit. She remembered her mother's voice from long ago, a whisper she had often heard before sleep. "Balqis, do not fear the creatures of the earth. Respect them, and they will respect you. Even the serpent can tell the difference between a friend and an enemy." The snakes slithered closer, but not with hunger. They circled her slowly, their tongues flicking the air. Some rested their heads against her feet as though bowing. Others curled near her hands, gentle and watchful. Not one opened its mouth to strike. Balqis understood then, this was no ordinary pit. This was a place of testing, a place of truth. Whoever was thrown in with a wicked heart would be torn apart by the snakes. But the innocent would be spared. Up above, the villagers still waited. They held their breath for the sound of screams. But the silence stretched longer and longer. The stepmother grew restless. She peered into the pit and whispered, "Why does she not cry out? What is happening down there?" The youngest stepsister picked up a stone and hurled it into the pit. The rock clattered against the wall, but Balqis did not move. Instead, the snakes hissed loudly, their bodies twisting in anger. A few even raised their heads toward the rim of the pit, their eyes glowing red in the moonlight. The crowd gasped. Mothers clutched their children tighter. Old men shook their heads. Whispers rose again, spreading like fire. "She is not dead. The snakes are not harming her. Could it be, she is innocent?" The stepmother's face turned pale, but she forced a laugh. "Do not be fooled," she snapped. "The snakes are playing with her. Soon they will devour her." But even as she spoke, a strange thing happened. Balqis rose slowly to her knees. Her ropes had loosened almost as though the snakes themselves had bitten through them. She pulled the gag from her mouth and lifted her face toward the villagers. Her eyes shone in the darkness like two calm stars. "Do you see?" she called out, her voice steady though her body trembled. "I was cast here to die, yet I live. The pit has judged me. The snakes know I carry no evil in my heart. But those who wished me harm, they will not escape." The snakes hissed louder, as if answering her words. One by one, they lifted their heads, staring directly at the rim where her enemies stood. Their bodies moved in unison, coiling and shifting like a great living wave preparing to strike. Fear gripped the stepmother and her daughters. Their bravado melted. They staggered back from the edge, clutching one another. But the villagers pressed closer. Awe shone in their eyes. Some dropped to their knees and whispered, "She is chosen. She is protected." Others murmured prayers, thanking the unseen powers that guarded the innocent. The stepmother shouted, "She bewitched them. She is a witch." But her words rang hollow, carried on trembling breath. For at that moment, the snakes began to climb the walls of the pit, not toward Balqis, but toward the rim, where her enemies trembled in fear. The night grew colder. The villagers stood frozen. Something greater than all of them was unfolding, and no one could look away. Balqis, standing in the heart of the pit, did not move. She simply whispered, "Justice comes." And the snakes obeyed. The snakes began to climb higher, their scales shining in the moonlight. One after another, they rose from the pit walls, their tongues flicking, their hisses sharp like whispers of judgment. The villagers, who had gathered to watch Balqis's death, now stood frozen in fear. Never in their lives had they seen snakes behave this way. Snakes were cruel to all, but these serpents seemed to choose who deserved their wrath. Balqis stood in the center of the pit, untouched, her hands raised as though in prayer. The snakes circled her like loyal guards, but none struck her. Instead, they turned their gaze upward to the stepmother and her daughters. The stepmother trembled. Sweat covered her face. She tried to speak but her voice cracked. "Stay back. Stay back," she shouted at the snakes, as if they could understand her fear. But her words were like dry leaves in the wind, weak and powerless. One of the villagers, an old woman with grey hair, cried out, "Do you see, people? The pit has spoken. The girl is innocent, and those who wished her harm are guilty." The crowd murmured in agreement. Some villagers began to step away from the stepmother, leaving her standing exposed. She felt their eyes burning into her, and she knew the truth could no longer be hidden. Suddenly, one of the snakes reached the rim. Its body coiled thick and heavy, its head rising high. It hissed and turned its gaze directly at the eldest stepsister. The girl screamed and stumbled back. Another snake followed, and another, until the ground near the rim was alive with slithering bodies. The youngest stepsister fell to her knees and cried out, "We did not mean it. We only did what our mother told us." But the villagers shook their heads. They knew lies when they heard them. The pit showed the truth. Those who plotted evil could not escape the judgment of the creatures. The stepmother tried to run, but the villagers blocked her path. "Do not let her go," said the chief. "She wished death on the innocent. Now the pit answers her deeds." The snakes hissed louder, as if agreeing with his words. Some lunged toward the stepmother's feet, not to bite but to trap her, their coils circling like chains. She screamed and kicked, but the more she struggled, the tighter they coiled. Balqis lifted her voice from the pit. Though she was tired and weak, her words carried power. "Mother of cruelty," she said, "you pushed me to the pit, hoping I would die. But see now, the pit rejects my death. It chooses yours. The same snakes you used for my destruction now rise against you. This is the justice of the earth." The villagers gasped. Her words struck them like thunder. For a moment, silence filled the night. Even the snakes seemed to pause, listening. Then it happened. The largest snake, black as midnight, rose higher than the rest. Its body glistened like oil, its eyes glowing red. With a loud hiss, it lunged at the stepmother. She screamed, falling backward, her daughters shrieking beside her. The snake did not kill her, but it struck fear so deep into her heart that she collapsed, shaking like a leaf. The people cried out, some in fear, some in awe. "The pit has chosen," they shouted. "The innocent lives, the guilty fall." The chief raised his staff and declared, "Let it be known tonight, Balqis is blameless. She shall rise from the pit, and her enemies shall face the judgment of the creatures they trusted for evil." The villagers hurried to lower a rope into the pit. The snakes did not stop them. In fact, they parted, giving Balqis a clear path. She stepped forward, her feet steady, her face glowing with quiet strength. She climbed the rope, and as she rose higher, the crowd stretched their hands to help her. When she reached the top, the villagers bowed their heads. Some even touched her hands and whispered blessings. The stepmother and daughters, meanwhile, lay trembling, surrounded by snakes that would not leave their side. Balqis stood tall. For the first time, she was free not just from the pit, but from the lies that had chained her. The snakes had spoken. The truth was alive. And the night would never be forgotten. The night after the pit trial, the whole village could not sleep. Men whispered in the courtyards, women talked at the water well, and children kept asking questions. Everyone's mind returned to the same shocking scene, the snakes, the hissing, and how Balqis had walked out unharmed while her stepmother lay trembling in fear. It was not just a story anymore. It was a lesson. Balqis sat quietly in her small hut, staring at the dim lamp beside her. For the first time in many years, she felt peace. No one shouted at her. No one called her cursed. She closed her eyes and remembered her real mother's face, long gone but never forgotten. She whispered, "Mama, I stood in the pit, but I did not fall. I am alive. Your daughter is alive." The villagers gathered the next morning in the square. The chief stood with his staff in hand, his face heavy with thought. The stepmother and her daughters stood to one side, still pale, still unable to meet the eyes of the people. The snakes had not bitten them, but their shame was worse than poison. The chief spoke loudly, his voice echoing through the crowd. "People of the village, what happened last night is not ordinary. We all saw the pit. We all saw the snakes. And we all saw the truth. Balqis is innocent. She has suffered long enough under lies and cruelty." The people cheered. Some clapped, some cried. For years they had believed the stepmother's words, but now the truth was clear. Balqis was not cursed, she was protected. The chief turned to the stepmother. "As for you and your daughters," he said, "your evil has been revealed. You tried to destroy an innocent girl. From today, you will no longer command respect. You will no longer hold power in this village." The stepmother fell to her knees, begging. Her daughters wept loudly. But the villagers had no pity. They remembered how many times Balqis had been beaten, starved, and thrown into the pit. The snakes had already spoken. From that day, Balqis's life changed. Women who once mocked her now brought her food and water. Children who used to laugh at her now followed her, asking her to tell the story of the pit. Men nodded with respect when she walked past. But Balqis did not let pride enter her heart. She spoke gently to all. When children asked her about the pit, she would say, "The snakes did not save me. It was the truth that saved me. Evil can rise high, but truth always stands taller." Months passed, and Balqis began to grow stronger. She worked in the fields, and the land seemed to bless her hands. Crops grew taller when she touched them. Goats and chickens thrived under her care. People began to say, "Balqis carries light in her hands. Whatever she touches prospers." Her hut, once broken, was rebuilt by the villagers. They said it was their gift for the suffering she endured. Balqis thanked them but reminded them, "I did not survive for myself alone. I survived so the village would learn. If one person suffers unjustly, the whole village carries the weight." The stepmother and her daughters lived in silence after that. No one trusted them. No one wanted to hear their voices. They became shadows in their own house. Some said it was worse than death, because they lived each day with the memory of the snake's eyes watching them. One evening, an old woman from the village asked Balqis, "Child, what gave you courage in the pit? Were you not afraid?" Balqis smiled softly and said, "I was afraid. My heart shook. But I remembered something my real mother once told me: when lies surround you, close your eyes and hold on to truth. Truth will not let you fall. And in the pit, I closed my eyes and held on. That is why I am still here." The old woman wiped a tear and replied, "Then you are more than a survivor. You are a light for us all." From that day, people no longer called her Balqis the orphan. They called her Balqis the light. And the story of the girl who walked out of the pit spread far beyond the village, told in markets, sung in songs, and whispered by mothers to their children. For generations, people remembered the lesson: evil may throw you into a pit, but truth will always lift you out. Years passed after the night of the pit. The story of Balqis did not die with whispers in the village. It spread like wind across hills, rivers, and faraway lands. Traders carried it to markets. Travelers told it in new towns. Griots, the storytellers of the land, sang it under moonlight. And wherever the story was told, people gasped in amazement. They asked the same question again and again: how could a girl stand among snakes and walk out alive? In every telling, the snakes became bigger, the hissing louder, and Balqis's courage brighter. Some said the snakes bowed their heads before her. Others said fire shone in her eyes and scared them away. But the truth remained the same: Balqis had stood for innocence, and innocence had saved her. In her own village, Balqis grew into a woman of wisdom. People came to her hut not just for help with crops or animals, but for advice about life. Young girls asked her how to face cruelty. Young boys asked her how to walk with courage. Even the elders, who once ignored her, now bent their heads and listened. One evening, a group of travelers arrived from faraway lands. They had heard the story of the girl and the snakes. They wanted to see her with their own eyes. When they met Balqis, they found not a queen in jewels or a woman of great riches, but a simple woman in plain clothes, her hands rough from work. They asked her, "How did you survive the pit? Was it magic? Was it power?" Balqis smiled and said, "It was not magic. It was not power. It was truth. Snakes know lies better than men. They will not strike at truth. That is why they turned away." The travelers were amazed. They returned to their lands and told her words to kings, chiefs, and even strangers in marketplaces. Soon, Balqis's name was known in places she had never seen. As the years passed, her stepmother and stepsisters grew weaker and lonelier. They had no friends, no honor, and no joy. Sometimes they tried to ask Balqis for forgiveness, but shame always choked their voices. Balqis never spoke harshly of them, nor did she seek revenge. When asked about them, she only said, "They have already punished themselves. Their hearts carry more pain than any pit could hold." This mercy amazed the villagers even more. They realized Balqis was not just a survivor, she was a teacher of forgiveness. One year, during the festival of harvest, the chief himself stood before the people and declared, "From today, the story of Balqis shall be told to every child of this village, so no one forgets what truth can do." The people clapped, sang, and danced. Children drew circles in the sand and acted out the pit story with sticks as snakes. Mothers sang songs that carried her name. Fathers told their sons, "If ever you are tested, remember the girl in the pit." Balqis grew old, but her spirit remained young. Her hair turned silver, her face lined with years, yet her voice was still gentle and her eyes still bright. When children asked her to tell the story again, she would laugh softly and say, "Ah, have you not heard it 1,000 times? But very well, let me tell you once more." And under the stars, her voice would rise, carrying the memory of that night, when a girl stood among snakes and walked out alive. Long after Balqis left this world, her story lived on. In villages far and wide, mothers told it to their children before bed. Traders told it at fire camps. Griots sang it with drums. The story became more than just about one girl. It became a warning to the cruel, a comfort to the suffering, and a light for those lost in darkness. And so it was said, snakes may fill a pit, but truth will always rise higher. No lie can bury the light. Balqis's name never faded. She became a legend. A legend that still amazes hearts today.